Well, at least those that are still here. So I was trying to think about how I wanted to approach the presentation this year. And for those of you that were here last year, we went through a lot of the challenges. But I think my role is pretty unique because I spend a lot of the time, a lot of the year, going around meeting with different governments, meeting with a lot of the different companies, the vendors in the space, end users, and I get an insight into what's really going on. So we always hear about IoTs doing this or doing that. I tend to have some ideas underneath it. So I thought what we'd do this year is have a little bit of fun. So what I'm going to talk about are the trends that I think are hot right now, the trends that some of you may like that I think are not hot right now, and then what's next. So the bad thing is, I know a lot of you want me to just do a bunch of numbers and give you all the different breakdowns. I'm not going to do much of that. But for those of you who want that fix, I'll give you a little bit. In 2019 in Asia, we're going to have 8.6 billion connected things. And that's out of a worldwide total of about 30 billion. That's going to generate about a $500 billion market opportunity. I mean, obviously, we've got some very large countries here that will drive that, China in particular. So one way to look at it would be to say, well, the most mature markets are going to be where the money is going to be spent. But I like looking at it a little bit differently. What I like to do is look at the number of things that we're going to connect in each country and then divide that by the population. Because then you can see how much penetration you're actually getting per country. And when we do that, the numbers are quite different. So you see here, the leaders are actually going to be Australia and South Korea, but for very different reasons. In Australia, a lot of it's driven by the mining industry, healthcare. But in Korea, a lot more of it is about robotics and automation. You also see New Zealand in there. And for those of you who were here last year, it's all about the cows and connecting the livestock there. But here you can see Singapore. So Singapore comes in about number 4. So there's still some room for improvement. Dr. Balakrishnan had mentioned he wanted to know where we actually stood in it. I'll share the slides with him afterwards so he can see how it breaks down. But before we go on to what's hot and what's next, I want to cover this topic of the gap. So this is what the theme of the event is this year. And these next 2 slides are actually from my presentation last year. And I was trying to warn the audience that we're building up too much hype around a lot of these different things, and in particular, smart cities. And the rationale behind this is, and let's think about this, when there's a smart city initiative, the first thing that happens is you get the stakeholders together. It's the government officials, it's a lot of the different vendors, and they do a big photo shoot. They take a group hug and say, we're going to create a smart nation or a smart city. And then what happens, they say, we're going to do this, and they deliver out the initiatives and how it's going to change our lives as citizens in 5 or 10 years. But in reality, that's step 1 and step 2. Then comes the gap. And this is steps 3 to infinity. And this is the problem that we actually face. It's been mentioned a couple times already. No one's writing blank checks. If you know of a city that is writing a blank check, please let me know because I am for hire. But it's also on the planning side. On the planning, think about this. How many different initiatives are there in a smart city? You have to look at the transportation, security side of it. There could literally be hundreds or thousands of different projects. So the countries and cities that are doing very well at this, and Singapore and Taipei would be the examples, have done a very good job of setting up a program management office to try and manage all these different things. The next challenge is around delivery. And this, let's face it, there's a skills shortage in this space. We don't have a lot of the people we need to deliver it. And finally, the platforms or the technology. Governments aren't always the best investors in keeping up to date with the latest technologies. So sometimes they're not even ready. Even if they want to do things right now, they have to upgrade their infrastructure first before they're ready to get there. And then they started realizing how difficult this is because you really can't just go to one vendor and have you bring you the full solution. Because in that ecosystem, you're going to have modules and devices that are going to connect through some type of a network, through the platform to create an app. You've got analytics running around that. You have to secure it. And you need somebody to put the professional services wrap around it. And that's what will allow you to deliver the consumer, government, and enterprise solutions. What's happened in the last year, people have sort of had a bit of a reality check. This is not easy. I can't tell you how many times people are asking me today, is this all going to just go away now? Because they're getting a bit frustrated. We heard all this hype, but we're really not living up to it yet. But don't worry, I think we will still get there, and I'll explain to you why. But this is really what's happened in the last year. It's been the reality check. There's a lot less hype, but more practicality. People are taking strategic approaches to delivering this. So on to the fun things now. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of each. So first, we're going to start with what's hot. And the first thing that's hot is below the surface innovation. And this will go back to the smart city example again. I really feel sorry for people like Dr. Balakrishnan because he's pitched this vision of a smart city. And as citizens who live here, we keep thinking, well, what am I going to see? What's going to impact me next? And the challenge is, what we see is just this tip of the iceberg, the things that are publicly visible to us. But in reality, what's being delivered are things that we don't see physically. So it's all the stuff that's going on below the surface, but there's a lot of it. And to give you an idea, this is just I pulled up a random image on Google and used it, and I started thinking, okay, what's actually being done here? What types of solutions are we putting in place today? And what you'll see is the vast majority of these solutions aren't really things that impact us on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't mean that we're not doing things right now, we're not going forward. It just means that a lot of it's below the surface and we're not seeing it. So that's why you're seeing a lot of the smart nations and smart cities becoming very active in how they market themselves to try and communicate the value that they're delivering back to the citizens. And this is the important thing if you're in this space. Communicate the value. Make sure you give them step updates, what's going on, how it's going to help their lives in the future. And what's driving all this? Why is it below the surface? Well, in reality, what we're focusing on are the basics. We're worried about productivity, improving about time to market, automating it, reducing our costs, and doing faster and better decision making. So this is from our survey from last year. We do it worldwide for a couple thousand companies. This is from 840 companies in Asia. Now, what you'll notice about all these drivers, you don't see much about driving new revenue streams. It's much more about driving operational excellence. And now that's not a bad thing, but it starts to show you where the market's actually going to grow. So from this, what you'll end up getting are the top use cases. So across the region, this is where we see the spend happening. The biggest spend areas are about manufacturing operations, freight monitoring, production asset management, smart grids, and smart buildings. So think about that. The stuff that's being delivered, a lot of those we won't see as citizens, we won't see as people, but it is going on, and that's where the investment is today. Only 12% of the enterprises that we did survey in Asia view IoT as an opportunity for revenue generation in 2016. People are going to focus on cost reduction. So if you're a vendor in the audience, you might have a great idea about how you can help them make money. They're more likely to buy it if you show them how to save money. It is maturing a bit, though, and it's also starting to go international. Already in Asia, 8% of the companies that are doing IoT initiatives are focusing internationally with them. But what's exciting, and if you want to know where it's going to go in the future, 54% of the companies plan to take their IoT initiatives international. So all the stuff that's going on below the surface is going to expand out, and it's going to build up the industry, and eventually we'll start seeing more of it come above the surface. So that's number one. Number two in the what's hot, it's about the IT-OT divide. And everyone probably hears a lot about IT and OT, but honestly, how many people are really comfortable about what that means? Thomas, I'm hoping you do at least, but okay. What we end up seeing is there's this divisiveness inside of a company as well as in the vendors. People tend to focus on either side. So IT is more your traditional infrastructure inside of your manufacturing plant. So it could be your server, storage. When you get to the OT side, it's about the operational technology. It's the processes that are going to actually run your business. And what we see is, and we're forecasting that 40% of Asian-based MNCs are going to integrate IT and OT by 2018. Now that goes across technology, processes, security, and organizational levels. What that means is they're looking for people who can talk to both parties and almost be a liaison between the traditional IT people versus the people who run more the line of business and actually running the processes. So both of them right now, though, must address the same challenges. And I showed a similar slide last year, and it looks almost the same. What that means is the results haven't changed year on year, and that's scary. We asked people what factors are going to inhibit the adoption of IoT in your organization. And you can see across the board, with the exception of Korea, security is number one. What's more interesting is if you look at the green boxes, those are all financial related. They don't understand the CapEx, they don't understand the OpEx, and they don't know where they're going to get an ROI. Now those small boxes in blue there, that's where it's more IT type concerns. Now what this means is you've got customers who want to go out there and do solutions, and you've got vendors who want to sell technology. If you're that vendor and you can't come in and do the business case for them and you can't explain the CapEx and OpEx, you're never going to close that deal. So we need to start addressing this. Understand what the needs are of the market and address our organizations and change them to go out there and hire in the people who can do the business cases for them. So the impact of all of this when we converge IT and OT, hopefully it's less silos, because right now what you end up getting is IT and the line of business doing two different things and not talking to each other. That will drive cost efficiency because they can then leverage similar platforms. But it's going to be a skills gap. There's not a lot of people who can sit in that space. And one of the interesting things about my role is I get contacted all the time by recruiters. Unfortunately, it's not to ask if I want a job. They want to know who's looking. So they want to know, can you find people in this space? And this is something where they're really struggling. And they're looking for roles like a chief digital officer that can be that liaison between IT and the line of business. For the vendors, it means you must also bridge this divide. There's a lot of technology vendors out there that are more on the IT side. If you want to really define your role in IoT, what you need to do is partner with these operational technology vendors and firms. They're the ones who understand the customer needs. If not, you're going to go out there and you're going to fall down anyway because the people they're going to buy from are the ones they've always bought from. So who holds that budget? And this I find kind of interesting. So this is specifically for IoT budgets. When you go across the world, Asia-Pacific, Korea, and India, it's still dominated by IT. So that's the pink section there. But you're getting a decent percentage there is controlled by OT or the line of business side. But then let's look at some of the more advanced markets here. Well, we got Singapore. Over half the budgets are actually controlled now by the line of business. Now in Australia, 68% is actually controlled by the line of business. So that's the budgets that you're going after. So if you're an IT vendor that targets your traditional customers and traditional people in the organization, you need to branch out and start talking to people in the line of business because that's where the money is held. But then, of course, there's China as well, which is quite different. And you can see only 16% is controlled by the line of business. It's still an IT-dominated organization. What this means for vendors is you have to find a way to actually navigate this. Make sure you know who to go talk to in the different countries. You'll probably need country-by-country strategies for it. Also, what we get are the new decision makers. So this is where we ask them, who's making the decisions in your organization around IoT? And in the blue one on the bottom is going to be the internal IT organization. Red is where it's going to be the line of business. But this green box is quite interesting. And the green box is the newly created business for IoT. So that's starting to grow. And then external is in the yellow. Now, I highlighted Singapore because what you can see here is it's quite blended already. It's a regional headquarters for a lot of organizations, so you're seeing quite a disbursement. It means it's more challenging because you have to be able to talk to more different types of decision makers. So that was the what's hot. Now it's time to move on to what's not. And I'm going to start out by offending quite a few of you because I guarantee you some people are going to come up and complain about this afterwards, and I'm happy to have the debate. There's too many devices and too many wearables that are delivering too little value. A lot of these things, I've said this from the beginning with smartwatches. I love the concept of them, but I want the applications and I want the value from it. Just providing me with notifications does not actually solve the full problem. So it doesn't mean I don't like these, but I think they need to improve and we need to change the model. So out of curiosity, I like testing the market. How many people have a fitness band or smartwatch on right now? That's not as much as I would expect at this event, but that's okay. I'll come back and check again next year. How many have a device that you wore for a month and put it in the drawer because it added no value? All right, that's 90% of the same group. Okay. Dirk put up 2 hands. He's got many in there. Yes, okay. Okay, I'm curious of this as well. The one in the center there is the gold iWatch. How many people have the gold iWatch? $30,000? Anyone? To buy something that's out of date in 6 months. Great. Okay, so no one did that. At least I'm happy. There's a risk in doing this, and I don't mean to poke fun at Fitbit because I do think this is a very nice device, but I want to show the risk in what's going on right now. This is their stock price since launch, and it's only been out for about 9 months. And what you see is they came out at about 30, peaked at about 50, and then it was sort of settling down back about 30 right about the time of CES. So the Consumer Electronics Show is a very big thing for them. They launched this new device, and the market hammered them. Their shares dropped 30% on the announcement of a very nice device. And the sentiment was, it's basically doing the same thing, it's nothing different. And then what happened a couple months later? They missed their earning forecast. So the consumer also started demanding more. It isn't just give me a watch that has some basic functionality and notifications. There's a limit to how much the consumer will spend, so we need to adopt it. In China, there's 4,000 plus smart device startups alone. We're forecasting that 80% of those are going to be eliminated through 2018. There's just too many devices that they're not differentiated enough. You're going to see some massive consolidation in the space. Next wave of wearables, if you want to know my positive views on it, you'll have to come watch my Wearables keynote in about a couple hours at the beginning of the Wearables session. This is the example of what I'm looking for. So this is a picture of the Samsung SIM band. And this is just a display. That doesn't impress me. This is what impresses me. So this band has 21 different medical sensors on the back of it. This has not been launched yet, but they're working with some of the top software groups and industrial groups across the world to look at how you can leverage these different types of sensors. It can capture your temperature, your skin moisture levels, blood pressure, you name it. And they're starting to build out all these new levels of solutions. Now, when you have that, I don't think, and I don't know the answers to this, they haven't launched it, and they won't tell me enough, which is bugging me. But why wouldn't they just start taking this and say, fine, this one sensor is very important to monitor high blood pressure. This one sensor can help you monitor somebody who's an outpatient after surgery and start creating single-use bands. So stop this thing of trying to put as much as we can on a single band and start making them really specific, and that will allow you to transform industries. Think healthcare, think pharmaceuticals, what you could do with this. There's a lot of other great examples. I'll give one later in the other presentation about what Bosch is doing in a plant, leveraging Intel's Basic Peak, but you'll have to come on later to see that one. The next one, conventional thinking, is not hot. And this is what we've always done. And this is something that I find a little bit frustrating. We try to apply the same old processes we've always done with the next levels. We've seen enterprise mobility do nothing really in 15 years, and I know because I've been doing it that long, and we're barely moving ahead from where we were. I'm afraid we're going to do the same thing with IoT if we don't change it. And what I mean by that is IoT is this new peg. It's a square peg, and we're trying to pound it into that same old hole. And for those of you who were here last year, Scott Jensen from Google gave the closing address. And he said probably the best comment I've ever heard on IoT. And it's, we are solving yesterday's tasks with tomorrow's technology. So we need to change the way that we actually think about this. Because right now, there's too much technology for tech's sake. How many people have this device at home, the connected fork? One of these days, someone's going to have it, and I'm going to be very happy. Yes, we've connected a fork. Why? Because we can. Is there any need for it? It's going to let you know that you're eating too fast or slow, or maybe it gives you an electric shock if you're eating too much. But why do we need this? And we're doing it just because we can, and not because someone needs it or it adds value. And go back 100 years when Henry Ford was creating, the first automobiles. He said, if I asked my customers what they'd wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. So we need to start changing the way we think. And what I'll do is I'll give you an example of a company I found that does this. But first, we're going to talk about smart buildings. So this is an area I've been looking at for 5 or 6 years, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I hear a lot of the same complaints about it. The people who have to control smart buildings, if you're an organization or a city, you might have 1, you might have 20, you might have hundreds of different buildings, which means you're going to have multiple building management systems. You're going to get more information and alerts than you know what to do with. There's no action plans on what to do with them later, limited budgets, and you just can't afford the downtime. Well, what's happened is this company was launched a couple years in London called Demand Logic. And I did an event with them, a smart city event in Nice. And I watched this presentation, and I walked up to him and said, if you can do what you just presented, you're going to change the industry. And I sat with him. I had dinner with him that night with a few of the other people at the event. And I got to see him have a number of conversations with them. And it was always the same thing. They raised these same issues. I've got multiple building management systems. They have a platform that just plugs in a box, links into your existing infrastructure. So whether you're using Johnson Controls or Honeywell to manage a building, they take that exact same information out there. But what they do is they filter it down and give you prioritized alerts. On the action plan, they've developed this collaborative platform that's kind of like a Facebook thing to allow you to track progress and actions. On the budget side, it's purely OpEx, and you're getting an ROI in as little as 2 months, and installation in less than half a day. Their record installation is 20 minutes. Now, what's interesting about this is because they were able to do this, they're not going in there and selling to small mom-and-pop shops. They picked up King's College in London. They do a lot of the big high-rises in London. And you will see them very shortly here because they'll be working in here shortly, let's put it that way, and in Malaysia as well. So they're going to be coming out here as well. But they just did something different. They had a different approach, and it changed the whole discussion. They didn't have to go there and try to work their way through small companies first. They could go to some of the biggest companies, biggest brands in London, the BTs, Santander, RBS, and actually get those discussions going because they had a different message. They took a new approach. They didn't deliver the technology. They came in to talk to them about a solution to their problem. It changes it all. So we've gone through that. What's next? Well, IoT at the edge. Here's the next buzzword you hear a lot about. We're forecasting that 35% of IoT-created data in Asia is going to be stored at the edge of the network. Now, for those of you who thinks, what does that actually mean, which was me the first time I heard it, the way we do things now, we tend to capture data at an endpoint and send it back. What we want to do is have those endpoints being able to actually talk to each other and make it more efficient. So you start driving lower costs, you're more agile, and it increases the speed of the processes. Now, if that's still confusing, think about a company you either work for now or may have worked for in the past, where everything was centralized, very hierarchical, where only the top person could make the decisions. That person on the bottom gets all the information and then just passes it through to the top, and then it comes back and filters down. What that is it creates higher costs, and it slows down the process. But then imagine if we actually empowered all those people to make the actions based on the intelligence they have. It becomes a much faster process, and it streamlines it. That's all we're really talking about. And how does that work in a city? Well, there's a lot of different things that are examples of it, but I'll go to the connected cars here. First of all, in connected cars, well, I won't ask you because there's too many people. I was at a meeting recently, and somebody from Audi was talking about the new A8. So depending on which model you get, there's between 6,000 and 8,000 sensors. That's the thing, like on a single car, a single automobile. So the idea of doing a connected car and driving around a city, if you're capturing all this information, you don't really want to send it back centrally and have it analyzed. You want that information analyzed there in the car so you don't start bumping into things or people. Another example is CCTV. Say you're doing HD cameras. If it's going on in the middle of the night when no one's supposed to be there, why are you going to send all that transmission back? What you can actually do is the exception processing. If someone comes walking in an area they shouldn't be in at night, you can send the image back. It's just putting the intelligence right at the front line instead of passing everything back, and it helps reduce a lot of the costs. Final one on this, low-power WANs. Low-power wide area networks. Now, trust me, this isn't going to become hype because it's not sexy enough of a term. So until we come up with a sexier term, it'll just be something we talk about in the background. But it's an important thing. You're going to see a lot of this in the next 12 months. And there's a couple reasons why. One is some of the vendors, the bigger vendors, are going to be launching what's called Narrowband IoT. It's in partnership with 3GPP, which is backed by a number of the mobile operators. The way to think about this is the mobile operators right now are trying to find a cheaper way to allow you to connect your things up to their network. But then on the other side, what you have is people who work on unlicensed spectrum, which will be Sigfox and LoRa. Now, they have a slightly different model. They're normally not going to be backed by the operators, but they could be. But they sometimes will compete against them. And the whole reason people are looking at this is because it saves money. And this is important because when you start going into this, the high bandwidth solutions are very expensive when you're doing digital signage, emergency services, connected cars. But there's all these things we can connect up for a very low price now. Think about smart meters. And smart meters in Singapore, maybe there's 1 million. Smart meters in China, we're forecasting close to 500 million. So think about the costs associated with that. Vending machines, environmental sensors. I'd love to be able to know what the exact environmental levels, the PSI levels are during the smog season here at my home versus my office instead of just having the 4 quadrants. It can be your funny-looking dog you can connect up, know exactly where he is, or all your livestock. Now, today we don't connect a lot of these things. But when the price point goes down so low, why wouldn't you? And you wouldn't do every package that you send via one of these DHL-type companies. But if you're transmitting something that has value in it, why wouldn't you tag it if it's going to cost you under $1? So why does this matter? Well, it's the improved business case. And what I'm showing here is the cost associated with doing a smart meter offering. So when you do it, nearly 20% of the cost is purely from the connectivity. Now, the 9% is the hardware, 55% is software, and 17% services. And I won't go through the big detailed model on this one, but to put it simply, today, if you're using a SIM-based solution through a mobile operator, you're likely going to be paying $12 to $60 per year for that SIM to connect up those tools. That's $12 to $60. Now, what we're talking about with these low-power WAN solutions, and these prices have not been announced yet. What we're doing is going out there and seeing what some of the vendors are talking about and looking at where they've launched these things in other countries. We're expecting that to go down to $1 to $12 per year. Plus, depending on which one you go to, you can reduce your hardware, software, and services costs. So what we're basically doing is redefining the whole business model. By doing that, reducing the costs means we start connecting more things. If you wonder how analysts come up with crazy forecasts like 30 billion, 50 billion connected things in the world, it's because this is what we're going to be connecting up. A lot of it isn't going to be the fancy things. It's going to be tagging dogs, livestock, you name it. So, but first, for that to work, it's a chicken and egg situation. You need this ecosystem to evolve. So because we've got the connectivity now, what you need is people who can deliver these services that will then run on top of it. So that's what I'd like to see everyone start focusing on for the next year and have the whole ecosystem evolved. So in summary, I gave you the what's hot, not, and next. Hopefully this will be some interesting conversations and you'll learn a lot more about these in the next couple of days. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to talk to me. But what I'd like to do is leave you with a thought. When you think about IoT, it's a journey. There's going to be failures, mistakes along the way. We'll love some new devices, then we'll hate them the next week. But what's important is, for it to take off, we need to change our perspective. Don't think about the technology. The technology is all there. Start looking at it a different way. Look at the problem or solution that you want to deliver. So on that, I'll thank you very much for your time. If anyone wants some more information, we've just launched a new infographic today on smart cities and a day in the life of a smart city planner. It's already been tagged on the IoT Asia hashtag, but it's also on IDC.com. So thank you very much for your time.